Today, we're looking at what happens when international sanctions, which are, the West's main tool of geopolitical pressure, short of war, run right into sheer strategic necessity.
A very powerful necessity in this case. We're talking about the war in Ukraine and this resulting deep alignment between Russia and North Korea.
Exactly. For years, the whole framework to try and curb Pyongyang's nuclear ambitions relied on these strict limits on essential goods. And the big one, the one we're focused on today, came from the 2017 UN sanctions.
Right, the cap on petroleum products.
Yes, the hard cap on refined petroleum, so gasoline, diesel, that kind of thing. And that limit is set at 500,000 barrels per country per year.
And what we have here, and this is thanks to just an incredible piece of investigative work, is the proof that this limit hasn't just been, bent or tweaked. It's been completely obliterated.
It really has. And our sources for this deep dive are a really powerful combination. On one hand, you have the visual confirmation from the Open Source Center. They did this rigorous satellite imagery analysis.
So you can literally see the ships.
You can see the ships. And then that's paired with leaked financial and customs records. These were obtained by the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, specifically through their Russian partner, Istories.
And that's the missing piece, isn't it? Because the satellite imagery tells you what is happening, but the financial records tell you how.
Precisely. We already knew something massive was going on just from the visuals. The Open Source Center had previously estimated that Russia shipped, get this, 1.3 million barrels of oil products to North Korea.
1.3 million.
Over just 9 months last year. So that's already more than double the annual limit, and they did it in less than 3/4 of a year.
So the violation itself isn't new, but what these records do is peel back the curtain. Our mission today is to move past just counting the barrels and actually map the network that's making this happen.
We're going to trace the money, the logistics, the really obscure companies that are involved.
And we're talking about some pretty wild stuff here. Moscow fuel traders whose revenue just explodes overnight, port operators in the Far East hiding behind, layers of Cypriot shell companies.
And my personal favorite, firms whose main business is officially listed as selling beer.
Selling beer.
Now suddenly moving millions of dollars worth of oil to Pyongyang, all with the help of state-affiliated banks. This is a sophisticated, multi-layered strategy for sanctions evasion.
Okay, let's unpack this. This isn't just about a few small, isolated shipments slipping through the cracks. This is an alleged multi-million-dollar supply line, and it's strategically vital for both Russia and North Korea.
But before we get lost in, the bank transfers and shell companies, we have to set the stage. We really have to start with the huge geopolitical shift that made this all possible in the first place.
Right. So why now? What changed?
To really get the scale of this collapse in sanctions, you have to rewind a bit. It's easy to forget now, but for a long time, Russia was actually largely on board with the UN sanctions against North Korea.
That's a critical point to remember.
Yeah.
Russia and China, they have vetoes on the Security Council. They were essential to even creating these limits in the first place.
They were, and before 2022, sure, their enforcement might have been a bit selective at times, but trade with North Korea was genuinely negligible. There was an official adherence to the rules, even if it was, sometimes reluctant.
So what was holding that consensus together?
Well, it served a broader diplomatic purpose, global stability, maintaining at least the appearance of non-proliferation, but that entire strategic landscape was just completely redrawn by the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022.
And that one moment created this immediate, desperate need for new alliances. And more than that, for specific stuff that Russia suddenly needed to keep its war going.
That's the perfect way to put it. And that is where North Korea enters the picture.
Right. What does North Korea have that Russia needs so badly that it's willing to just torpedo this long-standing diplomatic arrangement?
It's not complicated. Soviet-era compatible artillery shells and tactical missiles, and, crucially, in huge quantities. This is the whole foundation of what people are calling the Ukraine catalyst.
It's a simple trade.
It's a very simple trade. As David Lammy, Britain's former foreign secretary, put it, Russia has become increasingly reliant on North Korea for troops and weapons in exchange for oil. It's not a side deal. This is the core exchange.
Strategic quid pro quo.
Absolutely, and it overrides everything that came before it.
So if you think about the UN sanctions as this kind of chokehold on North Korea's economy, the war in Ukraine basically gave the Kremlin the incentive to just take a bolt cutter to the lock.
That's a great analogy. They prioritized an immediate military need over any kind of long-term compliance with international norms.
And this wasn't done in the shadows. We can see this shift happening in the open through these high-level diplomatic meetings.
Oh, absolutely. We can map the breakdown of the old relationship and the start of the new one very clearly. It really started to accelerate in 2023.
It began to crystallize after South Korea's president visited Ukraine in the summer of 2023, right?
Yes, that was a big trigger. After that, the signals of closer ties between Pyongyang and Moscow became really unmistakable. It was almost like a diplomatic response.
And then came the big visit.
Kim Jong-un's very public official visit to Russia's Far East in September 2023. That was not a secret meeting. That was a huge, visible signal that both countries were moving past the whole stigma of sanctions.
And the relationship didn't just get normalized, it was formalized. Which brings us to Vladimir Putin's trip to Pyongyang in June 2024.
That was the peak. That visit resulted in the signing of a strategic partnership agreement. So this isn't just transactional trade anymore. This is a high-level strategic alignment with a mutual defense component that directly challenges the sanctions regime.
And the sources show that Pyongyang, which is usually so opaque, is now openly admitting its support for the Kremlin.
They're not hiding it at all. They've even moved beyond just words. The sources mention they're building a memorial to fallen compatriots who fought in the war.
A memorial? That level of public acknowledgement really tells you how deep this military alignment goes. It's not just oil for weapons, it's a shared military purpose.
And this is where we can bring in the expert view on motivation. Fyodor Tutitsky, a lecturer who has studied North Korea for years, he just stripped away all the diplomatic language.
What did he say?
He said the puzzle of this sudden alliance simply fell into place because North Korea has weapons. Russia needs those weapons, and it needs them now.
And on the other side of that coin, what about Russia's motivation for ignoring this legal framework that it helped build?
According to Tutitsky, Vladimir Putin thinks only about seizing Ukraine. That's the singular, overriding priority, and it dictates a complete reassessment of all other diplomatic costs.
So getting North Korean arms is essential, and the cost of breaking UN sanctions in this new world is just acceptable.
It's the cost of doing business. So for you, the listener, what should really stand out here is that this sanctions breach wasn't born from some clever economic loophole. It's an active strategic choice driven by military urgency.
And that choice is reflected in Russia's public statements. They're still technically a party to the UN sanctions, but now they're publicly calling them detached from reality.
Exactly. And that public justification is what paves the way for the private financial network we're about to get into. They've basically declared the old rules null and void.
So the why is this desperate strategic alignment? The how? Well, that begins with the most visible part of the whole operation, the physical movement of oil, the ships themselves.
It all started with the satellite imagery from the Open Source Center. That visual evidence was the anchor for the whole investigation. It showed this clear, established supply bridge.
How many trips are we talking about?
Their analysis showed North Korean tankers making more than 40 trips to a port in the Russian Far East. 40! That's not smuggling, that's a dedicated supply line.
By a shuttle service, basically. But North Korea is famous for its shadow fleet tactics, right? Turning off transponders, ship-to-ship transfers in the middle of the ocean.
They are, and they likely used those tactics initially. But the investigation zeroed in on one high-profile example that shows just how brazen this has become. In early March 2024, a specific North Korean tanker, the Pyongyang San-1, openly docked at an oil terminal near Vostokny port.
Openly. As in not trying to hide.
Openly docked, which is incredibly audacious for a vessel from a country that spends so much energy hiding its activities, for it to just sail in, flying the North Korean flag, and pull up to a busy commercial port.
What does that signal?
It signals they felt they had nothing to hide. Or maybe, more to the point, that they knew they were immune from any immediate consequences. It suggests high-level political protection was in place.
And the rest of the world reacted pretty quickly to that, didn't they?
Oh yeah, it was swift. In April 2024, the White House came out and formally accused Russia of breaching the sanctions, and they cited the delivery of 165,000 barrels from Vostokny in March alone.
Which lines up perfectly with when the Pyongyang San-1 and other ships were spotted.
Exactly. And then in May, the UK followed up by sanctioning several Russian companies that were specifically involved in this arms for oil trade.
And that brings us right to the key port operator, the company that's physically loading the oil onto these ships.
TBK Toplivner Bunkernaya Kompania. They operate out of Vostokny port, based in Nakotka, and they were one of the companies the UK sanctioned.
So this is the physical choke point. What did the leak records tell us about how a company like TBK is structured to avoid accountability?
Well, it's a masterclass in how to hide who's really in charge. TBK itself is the Russian operator you can see on the ground. But the real control, the ownership, is hidden far away.
Through shell companies.
Layers of them. The company currently conceals its owners, but leaked financial statements from 2020 revealed this layered structure designed purely for opacity. The records showed TBK was owned by a Cyprus-based company called Dulcestar Holdings Limited.
Okay, so one layer deep in Cyprus.
But then who controls Dulcestar? Another firm in Cyprus called Fortress Nominees.
A nominee firm. So for the listener, what does that actually mean? Why does a Russian port operator need a Cypriot nominee firm?
That's the key question. A nominee firm like Fortress Nominees is basically a service that acts as the director or shareholder for hundreds of other companies. The person whose name is on the paperwork is a nominee. They are not the true owner.
They're just a name on a form.
Exactly. Their name is there to fulfill legal requirements while masking the identity of the person who actually controls the company and gets the profits.
So you have the Russian operator, owned by a Cypriot holding company, which is in turn directed by a nominee firm. What does that do when someone tries to enforce sanctions?
It makes it incredibly slow and difficult. The US or UK can sanction the Russian entity, TBK, but if they want to seize assets or penalize the people really in charge, they have to start peeling back these layers in Cyprus. That's a different legal system. It requires court orders, diplomatic pressure.
And by the time you get through all that, the money's gone and the structure has changed.
It creates this robust financial buffer. And that's the beauty of this investigation. The leaked records just cut right through all of that. We see the ships docking at TBK's terminal.
And now we could use TBK's own bank records to follow the money funding it.
Exactly. We're moving from the port to the financial engine of this whole operation.
Okay, so TBK's leaked bank records. What was the big revelation there? Who was paying them?
The records pointed to a new, previously really obscure entity, a Moscow-based fuel trading company called Southern Railway Expedition, SRE.
Southern Railway Expedition.
Yeah.
And they're not physically handling the oil.
No, they seem to be the financial facilitator. The records show SRE making these large payments to TBK, and they're specifically designated for storage and transshipment.
So they're paying the port fees. How does the timing of those payments line up with the ships we saw in the satellite photos?
This is the smoking gun. SRE's very first transfer to TBK in 2024, it was for just over 21 million rubles, so about $230,000.
Not a small amount to kick things off.
Not at all. And the timing is what's absolutely critical here. That payment was made in late February.
And the tanker, the Pyongyang San Juan, that arrived when?
Early March. So the payment landed a full 2 weeks before the ship even showed up.
Wow. So they're not just reacting, they're prepaying. They're scheduling the whole operation in advance.
Exactly. It shows this isn't some last-minute deal. It's a planned, coordinated logistical effort. SRE is the financial anchor, making sure the port is paid and ready before the delivery even happens.
And the payments just kept getting bigger from there.
Oh, yeah. After that initial one, there were 4 more transfers that added up to 115 million rubles. That's about $1.26 million in March and April alone.
And that's the period when all those ships were spotted.
It lines up perfectly. That period coincides exactly with the 23 North Korean ships that called at the port. The money flowed right as the physical activity exploded.
And it wasn't just a one-time thing.
Not at all. The high-volume transfers kept coming all year. Another 108 million rubles for the next 27 tanker trips. The data is just indisputable. SRE's payments to the port operator are the financial heartbeat of this entire maritime supply route.
So what this means for you, the listener, is that this company, SRE, must have seen some unbelievable growth. To handle this kind of money, their revenue must have just gone through the roof.
The growth is explosive. It just defies any normal business curve. SRE was registered in 2019 as a wholesale fuel trader, but it was a tiny player. In 2023, its total revenue was under 900 million rubles, maybe $10 million.
Okay, so a small to medium enterprise.
Right. And then comes 2024, the year this arms for oil trade really takes off. SRE's revenue surged to a staggering 18 billion rubles.
18 billion.
That's around $194 million. It's nearly a 20-fold increase in revenue in 1 year. That kind of exponential jump really only suggests one thing: a massive, consistent, high-margin trade that opened up because of a huge state-enabled opportunity, like sanctions busting.
And this nearly $200 million company is a ghost. No public website. The owner, Nikolai Josimenko, is a shareholder in a few other fuel companies, but is basically unknown. How do we link this back to the political structure that's protecting it?
You look at the owner's partners. The records show Gerasimenko is in business with a man named Ruslan Agayev in a company called Energotrade Kalmykia. And Ruslan Agayev is the son of a federal lawmaker, Bekhan Agayev.
In the Agayev family, what's their significance?
They're not just any political family. The sources highlight that they made their fortune in the petroleum trade back in the 2000s, and they're known for being close to the Kremlin-backed Chechen leader, Ramzan Kadyrov.
Okay, so this isn't some random businessman who just got lucky. This is an operation being run by a company with deep, established political connections.
The political backing is what makes the supply chain stable. And you see that stability again when you look at where SRE is getting all this oil from. To meet a demand that jumped by, over $180 million in a year, you need reliable suppliers.
Who are also politically connected.
Invariably. For example, one supplier is Slavyansk Eco. It's co-owned by Robert Pernyants, who is a wealthy regional legislator and, crucially, a member of the United Russia political party.
The ruling party.
So that's supply guaranteed by the state apparatus. Another one is Fortinvest, linked back to a former vice president of a major oil company, Slavneft. Another, Energosity, has co-owners tied to a former customs chief and the son of a former St. Petersburg governor.
So the common thread is that everyone involved, from the suppliers to the facilitators, is deeply embedded in the political or security establishment.
Exactly. SRE is drawing from a well of oil that is politically protected.
Okay, so we have the suppliers, we have the facilitator, SRE, we have the port operator, TBK, but the whole thing falls apart if you can't actually move the money through the banking system. How do they do that?
This is where sanctions are supposed to be most effective, by choking off the money. But SRE used two key banks, and both of them are massive red flags.
Let's start with the first one, PSMR Bank. They routed about $1.7 million through there. Why is that choice so telling?
Because TSMR Bank is already a known quantity in this shadow financial world. The U.S. sanctioned this bank way back in 2017.
For what?
For working with pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine. And more recently, it was accused of dealing with North Korean entities. So by choosing TSMR Bank, SRE just sidestepped the entire legitimate international finance system and went with a bank already known for this kind of work.
And the rest of the money went through Promsvyaz Bank, which is even more significant.
Oh, Promsvyaz Bank is a huge red flag because it's a Russian state lender. And more than that, it is very closely affiliated with the Russian Defense Ministry.
So when we talk about state-sponsored sanctions evasion, this is it.
This is the proof. And it's not just an affiliation. The financial records show that Promsvyaz Bank gave SRE a massive loan, almost 1 billion rubles, which is around $9 million, in 2024. The exact same year, SRE's revenue exploded because of this trade.
That's the link. This isn't just a private loan. A state bank tied to the Defense Ministry is directly financing the company that is facilitating the entire sanctions-busting operation.
The financing from Promsvyaz Bank guarantees SRE has the capital and the institutional backing to keep the oil flowing. It's an integrated, state-backed, and politically protected commercial network.
So this maritime pipeline through Vostochny Port is a huge operation. But what's really fascinating here is that the leaked records show this isn't even the whole picture. It's just one part of a two-pronged attack.
That's right. The investigation confirmed that Russia is also using a land route, sending petroleum products by rail.
Via the old Kazan-Rajin Railway.
Exactly. It's a historic line built back during the Korean War, a dedicated land bridge between the two countries.
How much oil are we talking about on the rail line?
The customs records show at least 315,000 barrels of petroleum products shipped by rail in 2024. So you add that to the 1.3 million by sea, and the total amount of fuel going into North Korea is just immense. It completely dwarfs the UN sanctions limit.
And just like the sea route, the companies involved in the rail shipments are incredibly obscure, which brings us to my favorite part of this whole investigation. Inverstopt.
The beer seller.
The beer seller turned oil giant.
It sounds absurd, but it highlights the nature of these evasion schemes. Inverstopt is based in Vladivostok, and according to its official company registration, its main business activity is beer sales.
A company whose legal purpose is selling beer is moving millions of dollars of oil by train. I mean, why? Why use such a bizarre front?
It's strategically simple. You use a tiny, irrelevant company with no history in sensitive international trade because, one, it flies completely under the radar of Western sanctions bodies who are looking for major fuel exporters.
And two,
if the company gets caught, it's totally expendable. You just dissolve it and create a new one. It's a clean slate.
and its financial numbers tell the same story as SRE's.
A perfect mirror. In 2021, Inverstop's revenue was negligible. maybe $20,000. By 2024, that number had soared to 666 million rubles, about $7 million, which corresponds directly to shipping 85,000 barrels of oil by rail to North Korea.
So the pattern is consistent?
Huh.
Find a tiny, obscure company and then pump a massive volume of this sanctioned trade through it.
And the owner just adds to the story, Natalia Bondar. Her previous business was a sole proprietorship trading in meat and vegetables. These aren't oil barons, they are administrative fronts.
But this network goes beyond Russia's borders. Innerstopped had to get paid by the North Koreans, and that's where the UAE comes in.
Yes, the UAE-based financial intermediaries were the clearinghouses. The records show Innerstopped used firms based in the UAE to process the payments, which successfully hides the true origin and destination of the money from global regulators.
And we have the names of two of these UAE firms.
We do. First, Amex General Trading, owned by a Russian businessman. They paid Innerstopped 80 million rubles. And second, S-Gravity General Trading, owned by a Kyrgyz national. They paid nearly 328 million rubles in 2024.
And do we know for sure that their purpose is just to move money?
We do, because they say so themselves. The investigation found the Russian-language websites for these companies explicitly state that they offer payment intermediary services.
So the UAE is being used as a financial haven. Stable banking, but high levels of corporate privacy. It's the perfect jurisdictional firewall.
It is. And if routing payments through shell companies in Dubai wasn't enough, the records show one more tactic to erase the paper trail. This involves another company, Atlant Export.
And they were dealing in cash.
Large amounts of it. This company accepted tens of millions of rubles at a time as cash deposits into its bank accounts several times a month.
Cash. For a high-volume commodities trade that should be done with wire transfers.
It's a huge logistical risk, but it gives you total anonymity from digital tracking. The payments were described as being for chorus contracts, we don't know what that means, but the use of massive, repeated cash deposits. That's a deliberate strategy to break the financial trail.
So we've mapped the sea route, the rail route, this crazy financial architecture with Russian firms, state banks, UAE intermediaries, cash. Let's get to the final link. Who is actually getting all this oil?
Right. And connecting this to the bigger picture, knowing the end user is everything. It tells you if this oil is for, civilian power plants or if it's fueling Pyongyang's military. And the customs data lets us see exactly who is receiving it.
So who are the main recipients?
Well, one is a company called Ka, the joint venture. They got over 60,000 barrels. The banking records just describe it as a joint venture in Pyongyang. There's very little public info. Like the Russian companies, it seems designed to be a blank slate.
But the next company on the list is much more significant.
Much more. Another 40,000 barrels went to the Future Electronic Company. And this one is the critical piece of evidence. It directly links the oil to the military-industrial complex.
Why is Future Electronic Company so important?
Because a UN expert panel back in 2019 had already identified it as a known front company for another entity, the Korean Mining Import and Export Corporation, KOMID.
And KOMID is?
KOMID is North Korea's main arms exporter. It's the organization responsible for selling weapons, ballistic missile technology, everything. They were blacklisted by the UN way back in 2009.
So that's the final link. That is the proof of the arms for oil trade. The oil facilitated by these obscure Russian beer sellers and vegetable traders is being funneled directly to the logistical network of North Korea's primary arms exporter.
The oil is literally fueling their ability to produce and ship weapons back to Russia for the war in Ukraine. The financial data just confirms the entire strategic objective of the supply line.
And there are others. Nearly 44,000 barrels went to a company called OCCRP.
And OCCRP was just hit with U.S. sanctions in December 2024. The U.S. Treasury specifically said it received thousands of tons of oil shipments from Russia. So this investigation is clearly feeding into real-world enforcement actions.
And finally, we have Raison Contrans, which sort of brings us full circle on the logistics.
It does. Raison Contrans is an established Russian-North Korean joint venture. It's been operating since 2008. They lease port facilities in Evasion, right near the Russian border, and critically, they operate that special railway line we were talking about.
So they're the permanent logistical hub where the sea and rail routes meet.
Exactly. Unlike the fly-by-night fronts, raising Contrans is the stable strategic artery for this trade. Its involvement confirms this isn't some temporary workaround. It's a sustained operation using existing long-term infrastructure.
The complete picture is just stunning. You have the strategic need, the Russian state providing financial backing, the use of these bizarre administrative fronts, and then the final link showing the oil goes right to the North Korean arms apparatus.
It really is.
So this deep dive, putting together the satellite data and these leaked financial records, it just reveals a sanctions evasion machine that is so much more sophisticated and systematic than I think anyone feared.
It's truly multi-layered. You have high-volume sea transport, resilient land transport. You have financial facilitation by obscure firms with politically connected owners like SRE and Inrastopped.
They're routing payments through sanctioned and state-affiliated banks, using financial havens in the UAE, and then even using huge cash deposits to completely obscure the trail.
So what does this all mean? Well, for the listener, the main implication is that this network has just completely shattered the UN's oil limits. It's turned a sanctioned trickle into a flood.
And more than that, this lifeline directly supports Russia's goals in Ukraine by giving North Korea the oil it needs to keep making and sending weapons.
It serves that critical dual purpose. It sustains North Korea's military, which in turn guarantees the supply of cheap artillery for Russia's war. This is not a gray market operation. It is an integrated, state-enabled commercial network.
And the administrative complexity of it all is what really stands out to me. The fact that they rely on shell companies that on paper sell beer, that they need loans from a state lender tied to the defense ministry. It just shows that breaking sanctions isn't about brute force.
No, it's about building these intricate but incredibly successful financial and administrative bypasses.
Which leaves a pretty big question for you to think about. In a world where great power politics is increasingly overriding these multilateral agreements, when that geopolitical necessity drives two nations together, how much control can international sanctions really have over something as essential as oil?
The sophistication of these bypasses suggests that where there is enough geopolitical will, state actors will always find a highly complex and highly successful way to route around the rules.